Roy Kirby is Director of Global Food Safety for Mondelez International. He is a member of Mondelez International's Global Quality Leadership Team. Roy's current responsibilities cover all food safety relevant disciplines including microbiology, toxicology, allergens, and packaging right across the product life cycle. He leads a high performing team across the world to ensure that Mondelez International's quality policies and expectations are applied and validated on a consistent basis. Prior to joining Mondelez, Roy was a member of the European Food Safety Authority's Executive Office responsible for quality management. Throughout his 30 years career, Roy has worked in roles spanning academia, public service, and industry, but always focused on consumer safety. Roy completed his BSc in microbiology at the University of Surrey in 1986 and his PhD in the survival of salmonella during chocolate mass production at the University of Reading in 1990. Roy is also a fellow of the Institute of Food Technology. Outside of work, Roy is married with 3 children and has many hobbies, with wine tasting being the principal one. So Roy, again, thank you for taking the time to be here and replying to my questions. I would like to talk with you first about you have been recently elected as GFSI board co-chair representing the manufacturing sector, and congratulate you on that. I would
Thank you
like
very much.
to share with us what are the main assignments of GFSI board of directors. What are your main roles?
So the main role of the board of directors is to lead the GFSI activities.
Mm-hmm.
Our role is to help the GFSI Secretariat with the development of the strategy, the development of the KPIs, the monitoring of those KPIs, and also then if there are additional resources that are required from the CGF, then we help the GFSI Secretariat with those resource requests to the CGF board. The way that the board is set up, we've structured it now into 4 subcommittees, and I've got to remember off the top of my head what they are, but there's the governance committee, which takes care of the rules and the procedures of how we're going to operate.
Mm-hmm.
There's the technical committee, which leads the work around the benchmarking activity, technical working groups. There's the public-private partnership committee, which aims at looking at how we're developing our work with regulators and with governments and with other stakeholders. And then there is the Global Markets Programme activity, which is looking at developing our outreach, so how well we're able to get the GFSI certificate made available and accessible to people who maybe haven't got the same level of expertise as some of the multinational companies.
Okay, that's great. So you were recently in the GFSI conference in Seattle, and I would like to ask you if you can share what was 1 or 2 of the biggest takeaways from that conference. What do you notice that was different from the last editions, for example?
I think the most exciting thing that came out of the GFSI conference for me was the announcement of GFSI's race to the top. I think it demonstrates it fully embedding into GFSI the culture of plan, do, check, act, continuous improvement. It's like a restless curiosity to make sure we're constantly getting better. And that for me was the biggest takeout and was extremely exciting. The other big takeouts for me was, I think this conference was the first time that maybe it's not the first time, but certainly the engagement with stakeholders beyond the industry and regulators. We'd reached out to academics, we've got NGOs, consumer groups in the audience and on the stage. So I think it had moved from beyond that purely industry, well not purely, but that focused on industry sort of conference with industry talking to itself, much broader, and that for me was extremely exciting. I think the last part was actually there was an energy. I don't know if you were there, but there was a real energy in the room that started off with Erica, the new GFSI director's call for action for us to all stand together, to that final closeout session where we had that wonderful presentation from, I can't remember the lady's name, but she was talking about how she's driving training in a different way using games. The
Uh-huh.
whole thing had a raised level of energy for me and commitment, and I was really excited by that.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. Well, now we have, I will change now for the new version from the 2020 version of GFSI requirements. I'd like to know your opinion. What are the ones, the new, that you are more excited about? And what do you believe may be most challenging for organizations from these new ones? What is your opinion?
So you're taking me into an area of technical depth that I probably should have, but don't have, to be honest. So the actual detail of what's in version 8, you're better off talking to somebody like Marie-Claude.
Uh-huh.
I do recognize that version 8 represents a significant step up from what we've done in the past.
Mhm.
And I think that even though it's a significant step up, I think one of the areas in there that is probably the most important isn't for people who are trying to get the certificates, but it's actually for the certification program owners, because we've strengthened the oversight that GFSI provides to certification program owners. I think one of the biggest things for me was how we're now looking in more detail at the CPO's integrity programs.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I think that, however, we have to signal that version 8 just represents one step, and it's not the biggest step. I think the excitement for me is around where we're going from here, and the race to the top is a signal that version 8 is a important first step in the race to the top, but it's not the end of the journey. And I think there are some really exciting things that are coming from GFSI that we've signaled, which are how do we start getting much more into aligned with what ISO has done with management engagement, company culture. I think those are really exciting areas for us to get involved in. And I also think that the work we've started on the integrity program also won't stop there.
Mhm.
I think the overall aim of this is to make sure that everybody around the world can trust, or have a greater degree of trust in the GFSI certificates.
Mhm.
We'd love to get to a position whereby we're doing less audits, but they're more meaningful, uh,
Yes.
and there is a high degree of trust around those audits that are done.
Mhm.
And I think at the moment we still have a journey to travel in so much as we've come a long way in reducing the number of audits and increasing the trust, but we're still not fully there yet. And I think that getting to that higher degree of trust with better audits, fewer audits, will be
Mhm.
really the nirvana that we're aiming for, if you like.
Great. So I think you talked about the subject that was the object of my next question, because one of the things that have changed is the introduction of evidence of senior management commitment. Okay, so the food safety culture. And
Yes.
my idea here is that perhaps you can share with us from your experience, even in Mondelez or before, um, how can we share with us concrete examples of how this management commitment can be shown, and can we sustain a food safety culture inside an organization? How can we do, if as you were talking about, if we have an interview, if we have an audit, how can we show, how can that be shown, the management commitment, the evidences from a food safety culture?
Mm. I think that's a very good question, and I think there's still a lot of work to be done on how we do that.
Mhm.
I know that the GFSI has published a very good paper on food safety culture, and
Mhm.
that's a very good place to start. It's possibly a bit long, but it's a very good place to start. I think we have to move away from, in the past, we've looked at, has the company got a quality policy, and is it signed by the most senior person on the site? It's a physical piece of evidence, and you almost can then tick that off and say, yes, there it is. We've got the quality policy signed off. I'm not sure that that's the full story, and I think we need to think about how we go beyond that simple piece of paper. And I think there are things that you can do, which is, does the company have an annual review with senior management where they look at in depth the performance of the quality food safety management system? Are there then actions that come out of that in-depth review that again lead to this idea of continuous improvement? And that's not a new idea, that dates back to the 1950s. I think the other part of it is almost like a restless curiosity, I think, and it is when everybody can go into a factory and decide they're going to look at compliance. But one of the things it's how hard are you looking? And are you afraid of the results that you're going to find?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've got to get away from this idea of being afraid of things that we find, make sure we're looking very hard, but make sure that we take the necessary actions to address what we find when we've looked hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be the real evidence of culture, is around about looking hard for problems and then rigorously following up on those problems and driving for their elimination, rather than maybe not looking as hard as we could.
Yes. Okay. Right. Nice one. Well, Roy, I'd like to talk a little bit now about you in Mondelez. You have a requirement that your internal and external manufacturing partners, have FSC 22000. But you explain from what I have researched that you suggest that, for example, for your suppliers, they can choose the one they believe it's right for them, but they should understand what are the difference and what is the one that is better to serve their needs. Okay, what I'd like from you is that if you can explain what are, in your opinion, the major factors food safety professionals must consider when they are choosing among one of the GFSI recognized certification programs. How do we do that? Because sometimes I get a lot of questions about that. How do I choose? What is the best for me? Well, if you can give me some tips how you can look up and decide what is the best for each of us.
Okay, so the first thing is to say Mondelez has chosen for itself that we will use FSSC 22000 for our own internal plants. Mm-hmm. For our suppliers, they are completely free to choose which scheme they want to use, and we will accept all of the certificates. And that's actually a requirement of the GFSI board. The GFSI board requires that all companies that are members of the board will all accept any of the certificates from any of the recognized certification program owners. But you ask a very good question, is how do I choose? I think there's some very obvious ones like Global GAP and Canada GAP are much more focused on primary production. So if you are operating in the area of primary production, there are some obvious choices to go for. I think one of the other bits that we would say is that in the past, people have tended to choose certification program owner schemes based upon historical relationships. For example, many of the UK retailers would probably choose the BRC program, but that's come from a historical link to that particular program. And I think there are other examples where retailers have their historical preferences. I think one of the challenges that GFSI is embracing is to make sure that actually it doesn't matter what scheme you choose. We should have the same level of trust in all of the certification programs so that it really doesn't matter which one you choose. You're going to get the same level of assurance no matter what no matter what scheme you choose, given as I said earlier, that some of them are more directed towards different parts of the food supply chain. Mm-hmm. I think there's a really important point there, which is like the GFSI is a brand like any other brand. And it's absolutely critical that the GFSI board is making sure that we are working to ensure that the necessary mechanisms to ensure trust in the brand are in place and are maintained.
Mm-hmm.
The current GFSI board, if you like, has a duty of care to the hard work and make sure that all of the hard work of the previous 20 years and all of the previous boards and people that have been involved is maintained. And I think we're up for that challenge, and I think we're going to be able to deliver on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I noticed that perhaps, I'm not sure, but perhaps due your position in GFSI, you don't want to get too much on details about advising people if you must choose one or two. I won't like that you say which one is better, but my question was more about how can we choose them? How can we distinguish them? Because of course there are differences, but they are not so big now. Okay, so they should be in each of them should be enough. But do you have any more specific advice for you to choose between, as I told you, not more about Fsc, FS, the manufacturing, because they are closer and it's not so obvious.
Okay. I think the first thing, yes, you're not going to get me drawn into a BRC is better than IFS. It's not going to happen, and that's absolutely key that does not happen. I think that the most important thing is to decide what it is and what is most important to you as a company that you are looking for in a particular scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit like having to know yourself and what your own objectives are first,
yes,
before you go out and make a choice. When you sat down and thought long and hard about what your objectives are and what's important to you as a company,
mm-hmm.
then I suggest you sit down and have good discussions with each of the CPOs, the certification program owners, to see which of them matches best with what you are trying to achieve.
Okay. That's great. Thank you for advice. Okay, I have two more questions for you. First, I would like to talk a little bit about, I find this, and it's very interesting. You say that Mondelez considers having a GFSI recognized certification as a cost to entry to become a supplier. But I would like to ask you about those organizations that have undeveloped food safety system, and GFSI is helping them to raise the bar by global markets. FSC now has already released the Fsc Development Programme, for example.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see those solutions for small and medium enterprises? And could in the future a company inside these programs ambition to be a Mondelez supplier, or really only the ones that are GFSI recognized?
So there was a lovely example last year. One of the companies that won one of the Global Markets Program awards was a small company that had been working towards GFSI certification. Mm-hmm. And they were suppliers to Nestle, Mondelez, and Coca-Cola.
Okay.
And we supported them along with their chosen certification program owner on that journey towards certification. And we were delighted that all three companies were very happy to accept whatever certification they got, and then they became suppliers to
mm-hmm.
Coca-Cola and Mondelez, which is, let's be honest, a fairly large chunk of the world's food business. So they were able to access that market.
Mm-hmm.
Mondelez does have a requirement that we have a requirement that all of our suppliers must have a valid GFSI certificate. However, we recognize that when we take on acquisitions or when we look for new suppliers, some of those suppliers do not yet have GFSI certificates.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we work with them to make sure that they get up to the GFSI certificate as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. We don't like to set firm timelines. We do it on a risk-based approach, and we do it on a how much of the journey do they have to travel approach. Mm-hmm. So if a supplier, there are suppliers out there who could get a GFSI certification today but haven't yet done so. Their food safety systems are at a level where it's just missing the audit. Mm-hmm. There are other companies out there that still have a long way to travel, depending on the ingredient, on the degree of risk that represents to us. we will be more rigorous and diligent on the degree of the food safety system and management that they need to have in place.
Okay, awesome. It's good to see that, well, small organizations can have the ambition to start for supplying big companies like yourselves. Okay, great. So my last question will be from an article I read from Dirk van der Put. Okay, he wrote about the importance of issues like deforestation and climate change. And we know in food safety, we also have a role to reduce food waste. And by that, we can reduce the pressure that we are doing on the environment. I would like only to know if you have any kind of process of programs inside your organization to reduce food waste. Are you tackling this in any way?
Okay, so I'm not competent to answer that question. I don't have contact with the deforestation food waste program. The only way I can answer that is a very general principle, which is Mondelez quality system is based upon right first time. That's what we aim for. You get it right first time, you reduce waste.
For sure. Okay.
That's the only large answer, really, the big picture answer I can give you. Of course, we always aim to manufacture right first time, and that will.
Yeah, we also have the questions regarding consumer awareness about expiring dates, all that kind of stuff. Because sometimes people don't know how to read the labels and spoil a lot of food because of that. But I think that is a good way to end. Roy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I think you provide a lot of examples that will help other food safety professionals. And I hope you will also enjoy this moment, and see you next time.
It's been very